Hello and welcome to Access Asia. I'm Yuka Hueye, and these are the main stories we're exploring in this edition. China shows off its military and diplomatic prowess in a giant Victory Day parade. We'll take a look at the bold message emanating from the meticulously choreographed spectacle. Public anger grips Indonesia, where protests over a cost of living crisis and perceived indifference of political leaders have boiled over into violence. The situation is also drawing regional solidarity. And if you still play with your favorite childhood toys or even buy new ones, you're not alone. The so-called kidult are now a major sales driver for the toy industry. China unveiled cutting-edge weaponry and showed off its growing clout as a global power at its biggest military parade to date. The event, marking the 80th anniversary of its victory in what Beijing calls the war of resistance against Japanese aggression, was designed to send a clear message to the world. President Xi Jinping oversaw the parade, flanked by his guests of honor, including Russia's Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un, saying that the world was facing a choice between peace and war, and that China was never intimidated by bullies. It came just after Xi hosted a major summit of the Global South, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Well, for more analysis, let's bring in Eric Ollander, Editor-in-Chief of the China Global South Project. Thank you for joining us, Eric.
Great to be here.
Now, Beijing went to great lengths to prepare the military parade. It's fair to say it was perfectly orchestrated. What are the main takeaways for you?
Listen, this was a big week by any measure, and it was a week when the Chinese, and Xi Jinping in particular, wanted to project a message of power. And it did. And remember that this started back well before the parade, when Xi held at least 13 or 14 bilateral meetings, most notably with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in a bid to try and settle or resolve or at least reset very strained India-China ties, followed by the SCO summit the following day, which was really a demonstration of China's convening power. I mean, there are very few countries in the world that can bring together as many leaders from as many different places as they did. And not only did they bring in some of their traditional partners like Pakistan and Iran and Russia, who are very predictable partners for the Chinese, but they brought in new countries from Southeast Asia. And we saw Vietnamese Prime Minister Chin there. We saw Anwar Ibrahim from Malaysia. And again, now you're starting to see a picture of the SCO enlarged to a point where it becomes quite formidable if it is actually something mobilized into a new coalition that presents an alternative to the US and European-led international order.
Well, there were certainly a lot of optics. You mentioned the SCO summit for diplomatic events, but also at the military parade, we saw the leaders of China, Russia and North Korea stood shoulder to shoulder for the first time in 66 years at a military parade. Are we sort of witnessing some kind of geopolitical turning point?
It's hard to tell at this moment if it's a turning point, but what we did start to see is a glimpse of what a post-American order starts to look like. One of the things that a lot of people remarked this week was that the U.S. felt small. The U.S. felt insignificant. It wasn't directing international events. And remember, there was this real contrast in power on display where China is really projecting this strong state power. And in the United States, the message this week was how they're taking away vaccine mandates and the state is in retreat in places like Florida. And it was really just an interesting contrast to watch how Trump really did not have a response to this other than complaining that these powers are conspiring against the United States. And it really did present a very stark contrast between the U.S. and China right now. And so whether it's a turning point, that's hard to tell. But what it did provide was, I think a lot of people feel, was a glimpse of a post-American-led order. Whatever that is, we don't know. But certainly there is a major pole of power outside of the United States now.
Well, does China, though, really want to create a new world order challenging Western hegemony together with autocratic leaders really like Putin and Kim? Or behind the scenes, is it taking a more pragmatic approach?
No, China Listen, and they've been very clear about this, and it's been a misinterpretation by a lot of folks in the U.S. and Europe that China wants to replace the United States as the global hegemonic power. China's made it very clear for years that it benefits enormously from the status quo. At the same time, it's a revisionist power. It does want to create more room for it to be able to operate. It is creating this parallel international governance architecture. And one of the highlights from this week's speech that Xi unveiled is the new Global Governance Initiative. That comes on top of the Global Development Initiative, Security, AI, and Civilization initiatives. All of these things in conjunction with the SCO, the BRICS, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the New Development Bank, all of these institutions are meant to create a parallel international governance architecture that is not led by the United States or Europe, but at the same time is not intended to necessarily replace. We're not going to see the Chinese PLA Navy patrolling the South Atlantic and contributing to public goods the way that the United States has for 80 years. That isn't going to happen. That's not what they want to do. They do want to be the hegemonic power here in Asia, but that's very different than replacing the United States as the sole global hegemon.
Well, another world leader that grabbed particular attention this week was North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Now, China's relationship with North Korea had somewhat cooled since Pyongyang started forging closer ties with Moscow following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Why did Xi Jinping roll out the red carpet this time for Kim?
Yeah, that was very interesting to watch. You know, China and North Korea have always had this very complex, multi-layered relationship where on the surface they look like China's only true ally in Asia. It has been said that it's North Korea, but at the same time, North Korea does express an enormous amount of autonomy in the relationship. And China has shown, and Xi in particular, that it's been very difficult to manage this relationship. But I think that Xi senses a moment now, and you could see that on the red carpet with the engagement that he had with Modi and with Putin, where they were laughing and having the confidence of having Putin right next to him. And by the way, just remember, there was Putin, there was Kim Jong-un, and there was Prabowo Subianto, the Indonesian president, who was there as well. And I think that Xi really sees a moment right now where he can convene these powers and do things that he hasn't been able to do in many years. And I think this was also part of a reset with Kim.
Well, Eric Olander from the China Global South Project, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, Indonesia has been rocked by violent protests in recent days. Demonstrations initially began in late August after Parliament decided to increase lawmakers' housing allowance to almost 10 times the minimum wage and brought long-held fury among the working class to the forefront. Now, the plight of ordinary Indonesians has drawn solidarity from neighbouring countries like Thailand, Singapore and Malaysia. Aurore Dupuis has more.
1,300 kilometers from Indonesia, in neighbouring Malaysia, these students are glued to their screens, watching the deadly riots in Jakarta.
Burning buildings looks very scary and, you know, like, whoa, what's happening? But I think that it's a mark that they have power as people because they work together. And when things are harming the people, they step up.
Armed with their mobile phones, Aiman and his friend are using delivery apps to support Indonesian protesters.
Hello, sir. I'm ordering food for you. Please accept it. I'm donating from Malaysia.
Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure. I hope you and the Indonesian people are safe out there.
Like them, people from Singapore, the Philippines, Thailand are making donations, appalled by the ongoing chaos in Indonesia. Protests erupted late August when it was revealed that MPs were receiving lavish housing allowances every month, 10 times the minimum wage in Jakarta. Students and workers tried to storm the parliament, protesting against social inequality and corruption. Rioting, looting, met by a heavy crackdown. The situation escalated when a police vehicle hit and killed a delivery rider. Anger spread across 50 cities. Thousands have been detained, hundreds injured.
The state has an obligation to value, respect, fulfill and promote human rights and women's rights. but the state neglects to do so.
Regardless of who is in power today, we only want to fight for one thing: the people's sovereignty.
Pressure on the government keeps mounting, but President Prabowo Subianto says the authorities will stand firm against what he calls acts of terrorism and treason.
If you are like me, who like to stroll around toy stores from time to time to check out the latest addition to classics like Lego, Barbie and Sylvanian families, well, you are among a growing number of kidults, children at heart with spending power, who have become an important consumer base for toy makers. At a recent trade fair in Japan, they were out in force. Emerald Maxwell and Luke Schrager with this report.
Toys, it seems, are no longer just for kids. At the Tokyo Big Sight Toy Fair, industry insiders know just who to thank for a resurgence in fortunes that shows no signs of stopping.
We have seen continuous expansion over the last 5 years. The biggest driver of growth is what we call kidults. More and more products targeting this group have been introduced into the market and have been very successful.
With the toy industry in Japan now worth over 5.8 billion euros, that's putting it mildly. A huge draw is the nostalgia factor for adults who have disposable income to wield for what they once considered science fiction.
The technology has advanced so much. In fact, the kinds of toys I imagined as the future when I was a child are now things that today's children can actually play with.
Toys are increasingly making use of emerging technologies, especially artificial intelligence. AI gives this robot inspired by a meerkat the power of speech.
最近寝つきが悪いんだけど、どうしたらいいかな。寝つきが悪いのは辛いよね。寝る前にスマホを少しお休みするのもいいかも。
The balancing act firms need to maintain is attracting adults and kids, who will be tomorrow's adult customers, even as the Japanese are having fewer children on the whole.
That's it for this edition of Access Asia, but please stay tuned if you can. There's more world news coming up here on France 24.